with the audiobook of Orso, Wartime Journals of an Anarchist, Lorenzo Orsetti, aka Heval Tekosher-Pelin, who was martyred in Rojava just after I left Rojava. I'll start with this quote by Abdullah Öcalan. I remain committed until the end to the struggle for liberation and to the beauty and love it creates. Editor's note. This book, The Journal of an Internationalist Fighter in Rojava, was first published in its original Italian by Red Star Press. We are indebted to the work of Oriana Lickert, Warren Stoddard, who I know I have met and we worked together in Rojava, Suresh Kesk, Shahid Chia, Finbar Kafrki, Sarah Cianciano, Gelhat, and Warren Stoddard II for their work translating this document into English. We hope to bring the words and experiences of Orso to a wider audience and to contextualize his writings where possible with essays explaining the historical and cultural context in which Orso lived, fought, and died. Footnotes have been provided by an anonymous international volunteer who served in Rojava in a medical capacity. Another personal note, it looks like Warren was giving credit to his father, Warren Stoddard I. I knew Warren Stoddard II. Acronyms. This text, like many conversations about Rojava, deals with a large number of acronyms. We have done our best to explain them as they appear through descriptions and footnotes, but here is a short glossary of some of the groups operating with and around Orso that the reader will encounter in this text. AANES, Autonomous Administration of North and East Syria. FSA, Free Syrian Army. HPC, Syrian Civil Defense Units. HTS, Tahrir al-Sham, a jihadist group. NFL, National Front for Liberation, a jihadist group. PKK, the Kurdish Workers' Party. SDF, Syrian Democratic Forces. TIKO, TIKKO, Turkish Marxist-Leninist Communist Party. TKP-ML, Communist Party of Turkey, Marxist-Leninist. YPG, People's Protection Units. YPJ, Women's Protection Units. I previously read the Martyr Letter. There's a map that shows Syria and where it meets the borders of Turkey, Iraq, and Iran. Also Lebanon. And it zooms in on the Kurdish region, basically Kurdistan and northeast Syria. The Preface by James Stout. Like many anarchists, Orso lived with several names. He died with the name Tekosher-Pelin, but in the years before he died, he lived with it well. He came to Rojava as Orso, a nickname he carried for much of his life, which translates to bear in Spanish. He wanted to be a bear in Kurdistan as well, but his Kurdish friends told him that bears were not well loved in the region. Instead, they called him Tiger, Pelin, and gave him the first name Tekosher, which means struggle. That's the name his friends from Rojava called him when they spoke to me. Teko for short. Teko, a friend told me, was always smiling, like he was getting away with something, like he was getting away with robbing a bank, they told me. When Orso went to Syria before he became Tekosher in the academy, where he trained with other international volunteers, he knew that the fight he was volunteering to enter was not just a fight against the so-called Islamic State, but against the concept of the state as well. This meant, in 2017, a fight with few allies and many enemies, and he knew that his participation in the Rojava Revolution would lead to his persecution and possible incarceration if he ever returned home. And this is what I experienced and am still experiencing. He accepted his fate, perhaps in part because he found a new home among the international volunteers and the people of Rojava, who all came together to create and defend an incredible island of freedom in one of the 21st century's most vicious conflicts. When the Syrian people rose against the Assad dictatorship in 2011, they did so with more rage than plans. In the vicious fighting that emerged, the people of Syrian Kurdistan began to carve their island of freedom when Assad's troops, who had long persecuted them because of their ethnicity, retreated. In the place of Assad's Ba'athist regime, the people of Syrian Kurdistan, also known as Western Kurdistan or Rojava in Kurdish, found that the political thought of Abdullah Öcalan, their incarcerated leader, suggested a path forward. In what eventually became the autonomous administration of North and East Syria, it was not the leaders, but the everyday people who spent years building stateless democracy after the withdrawal of the regime. Power was devolved into communities, and although the area is majority Kurdish, the Arab, Armenian, Yazidi, and Syriac communities all gained autonomy that they had not enjoyed under the centralized Ba'ath regime. Just like non-Arab ethnic groups suffered under the Assad regime, women were also systematically oppressed. In the Autonomous Administration of North and East Syria, AANES, women were not just elevated by the revolution, they led it. Öcalan's political thought holds that the patriarchal family was the first instance of colonization, and that until women could be liberated, there was little point fighting other colonial structures. To do this, they established a system by which councils and committees were co-chaired by a man and a woman to ensure they did not replicate gendered power structures. The women of the Women's Protection Unit, known by their Kurdish acronym YPG, which is Yekinen Perestina Gel, showed their equality on the front lines and the home front, when they both assumed positions of leadership in their community and also led the charge against the violent misogyny of the Islamic State. Not only did the people of North and East Syria build a revolution, they did so as the Islamic State emerged and threatened their project, but proved unable to defeat it. They have continued to do so as the Turkish state has bombed and attacked them. Joined by volunteers from around the world, the Syrian Democratic Forces, the umbrella group under which the People's Protection Units, better known by their Kurdish acronym YPG, and the YPJ, as well as various Arab, Armenian, Assyrian, Marxist, and anarchist units, fight for liberty and autonomy in Syria and survive to this day. The AANES is not run on strictly anarchist principles, but for all of us who believe people can organize equally without the state, it is an example that has leapt out of the political thought of Öcalan, Bukchin, and others and onto the map. We can visit it not just in our dreams, but in actual tangible solidarity. For many, like Teko, this little island was a special place, one worth fighting for and worth dying for if need be. And I feel the same way. If you can go to Rojava, then go there, and don't ever leave. The states of the world supported the YPG and their allies in the Syrian Democratic Forces in their fight against the Islamic State. But when the people of the US and its allies asked to die fighting ISIS needed help, the states of the world would not defend them against the Turkish state. The movement that gave rise to the revolution in Rojava began in the mountains of northern Kurdistan, where the Kurdistan Workers' Party, or PKK, took up arms against the Turkish state and demanded the right for Kurds to speak their language and govern their communities. Ever since, the Turkish state has pursued and attacked any form of Kurdish organizing under the auspices of combating PKK terrorism. Orso knew this when he decided to go to Afrin to fight a Turkish incursion into the AANES, and he went anyway because the revolution in Rojava was something he felt was worth defending. At that time, he was defending it with a communist group known by the acronym TIKO, T-I-K-K-O. Later, he would give up his life defending the revolution as an anarchist as part of Tekoshina Anarchist, the anarchist struggle. His comrades there told me that he died as he lived, which is to say with a smile on his face and a circle, A, on the letter he wrote to speak for him in the event he could no longer speak for himself. In Rojava, one fights alongside friends and not comrades. The word in Kurdish is haval, and perhaps the translation to friend is not exact, but it doesn't just mean comrade. This is important because what Tekoshir shared with other revolutionaries was not just an ideology, but also friendship, and a type of love that can only be experienced when living the things one dreams about and finding complete freedom amidst the horrors of war. Tekosher loved his friends, his family, the revolution, and stray dogs without remorse or restraint, and because of this he was happy to die for them. In their memories of him, his comrades and Tekoshina anarchist shared not just his bombastic personality, but the kindness and care with which he phrased his criticisms of them, and his genuine revolutionary love that not only loves someone as they are, but strives to work alongside them to make them the person they wish to be. Many international volunteers went to Rojava to defend the revolution, not to defend the revolution, but to fight the Islamic State. Those who stayed, like Tekosher, did so because they had something to fight for as well as against. After fighting in Afrin against the Turkish state, he went to Baghouz to defend the revolution and participate in the final battle against the Islamic State. This is the battle that I fought in. In Baghouz, he fought alongside anarchists from around the world who had abandoned their states and their chances to return home in order to build a new home in the lands they liberated every day from the tyranny of the group they called Daesh, and many know as the so-called Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. He survived the fighting in Afrin, where he stood with his comrades against the might of the Turkish state, with its warplanes and drones and artillery, and in defense of liberty. After making it through the battle with his body intact, he chose to stay and keep fighting. His friends tell me he was happy in Rojava, and that he chose to stay and fight in the final battles against the increasingly desperate core of the Islamic State rather than returning home. He had a way, his friends said, of making sure he was always at the heart of the action, in the hardest places where the revolution most needed defending. In his martyrdom letter, written before he went to the front to be published in the event of his death, Teko advised his readers that every storm begins with a raindrop, and they must make sure to be that raindrop. He made sure to be at the heart of the storm in Baghouz, where his comrades set about the destruction of the last holdouts of the Islamic State. Going toe-to-toe with the most fanatical and experienced fighters with whom there was neither compromise nor surrender. It was here, fighting side by side with an Arab unit within the Syrian Democratic Forces, that he met his end. After his death, his comrades published the letter that he had written for the occasion. "My life has been a success," he wrote, "and I am almost sure that I went with a smile on my lips. I could not have asked for better." The friend who recovered his remains assured me he was, just like always, smiling like he was getting away with something incredible. As a conflict reporter, I think a lot about what we owe the dead. Of course, we should participate in the struggles we shared with them with all of our energy and create a memorial for them in the better world we build. But we don't owe them this. We do it because it is the right thing to do. I believe what we owe them is this truth. We should not write hagiographies of them or make them saints. We should allow them to be seen as they were and to be known as they lived. This translation allows readers to witness the world through Orso's eyes, to share his passion, empathy, and optimism, as well as his struggles. More than ever, we need revolutionaries who will work for the cause with their hands, not their mouths. And Tekosher is an example of just that. In the lifetime of thinking about the revolution, he only fully became himself when he began doing the revolution. This book allows us to see that journey and hopefully to learn from it. Everyone who goes to war leaves a piece of themselves behind there. Some people lose limbs, others lose their sense of serenity and safety, and all of us lose sleep. Teko lost his life, but he also grew during his time at war, which is much rarer. War is the most base and violent of human practices. It's the worst thing we do to one another, and it often brings out the worst in us. As Orso became Tekosher, he held on to his joy, his love of stray dogs, his eternal optimism, and his investment in helping the people around him become better. Even his last words written in this letter contain a great sense of hope. These are difficult times, I know, but do not resign yourself. Do not give up hope, never, not even for a moment. Even if the whole world seems lost and all the bad things that afflict humans and the earth seem unbearable, continue to find strength and inspire your companions. It is exactly in those darkest moments that your light helps. The family's introduction to the Italian edition. Since the day of his death, many people have asked us, who was Lorenzo? What did he do and where did he live? We could begin this collection of his writings with a biography detailing when and where he was born, what he studied, his primary educational experiences, his jobs and political activities. In short, we could present him how people are typically presented. Instead, we, his family, felt it was important in order for people to get to know Lorenzo, to share other things, what he wanted, and what still moved him when, despite his pain, he decided to continue to live and fight, or if he retreated into himself, or if he could have handled the pain, or if he was still able to suffer with others, or if he tried to escape from reality. Lorenzo, despite struggles, still maintained hope and the ability to love unconditionally. The children, women, and men whom destiny placed next to him. For that love, he could make his sacrifices and give up material possessions. He was able to see the beauty hidden behind the quarters of war, and despite the daily presence of death, he knew how to appreciate and enjoy the small things in life. Despite the cultural differences and his path through life up to that time, Lorenzo managed to fit into the Kurdish project, integrating himself fully into a reality that is very different from the Western one. Lorenzo left Italy on September 22nd, 2017, for the northeastern Syrian territory commonly known as Rojava, in order to contribute to the social reality that the people of that land strive to achieve every day, democratic confederalism. This social and cultural model represents the only way to build in that area of the Middle East a peaceful society. The key values of democratic confederalism are bottom-up democracy, respect and coexistence between different ethnicities, equality between men and women, social ecology, and a cooperative economy. Abdullah Öcalan, a leading figure of the Kurdish movement, describes this project as democracy without a state. This stateless democracy is constantly threatened. The citizens of Rojava have had to defend, with arms, both their existence and their culture. These conflicts have cost them more than 12,000 lives as they've resisted attacks by Assad's Syria, by Erdogan's Turkey, by Iran, Russia, and ISIS. The need to protect themselves has given life to the YPG, the People's Protection Units, and the YPJ, the Women's Protection Units. Thousands of young people from all around the world have contributed to the fight side by side. These are internationalists who have both carried out organizational tasks and wielded weapons on the battlefield. Lorenzo was one of these young people. Our family still remembers the September day when he left. After saying goodbye to us, he took the train to Rome, beginning that journey that led him so far away, a journey from which he would emerge a hero. At first, we tried to dissuade him since it was terribly dangerous, but in the end, we understood how important it was to him. Lorenzo was born at Ospedale di Bagno in Ripoli, close to Florence, on February 13th, 1986. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing these. He went through his schooling and then chose to work so he could be independent, although that meant fatigue and sacrifices. Still young, he started working first as a waiter and then after training as a cook in a restaurant. His choice of autonomy was always one of the traits that characterized him, along with his desire for freedom. He pursued those two things with determination. When he put his mind to something, he carried it forward, regardless of whether it was difficult or demanding. Lorenzo rebelled against every injustice and got angry when his freedom was restricted. His desire to understand and not to stop at the surface of things constantly prevailed. His mother remembers one afternoon when, coming out of school, Lorenzo asked her, "Mom, is this all there is to life, or is there more to it?" School and work tested him, as daily injustices and provocations, both large and small, were often on his mind. However, these experiences led him to study and explore sociological and philosophical issues, and to comprehend the mechanisms and roots of oppression. In those years, he read and studied, and this helped him define his own thoughts regarding life and society. He came to understand how capitalism and neoliberalism were the source of physical and psychological suffering, as well as the main causes of inequality, pollution, and cruelty towards people and animals. Lorenzo's discontent was born out of his experiences of the workers' lack of power and of the offensive disparity between the rich few compared to the many poor, of the injustices of those who hide behind their laws for their own benefit. The inequalities in the world should make us angry. If only we were less addicted to the pain of our fellow human beings. Lorenzo, on the other hand, was an idealist. He thought that the world should be a beautiful place for everybody to live, a place where both justice and dignity for everyone were indispensable, where every person could be free to choose their own life. At that time, Lorenzo may not have been clear about how he would live in such a reality, but he certainly rejected the current situation. He came to terms with our reality, though many people call him naive and accused him of not understanding the meaning of life, the mechanics of the economy, or the advantages of capitalism. Lorenzo never lost his protesting spirit and never let his passion fade. Starting with his emotions and thoughts, he overcame the concept of individualism that is so dear to our society. Perhaps he didn't identify himself within structured social classes, but he certainly understood that he existed within a part of society that opposes the system, that chooses not to play the game, and this led him to cut off relationships with people in whom he did not see himself. Sometimes he was accused of being overly critical of the way the world works, but he kept looking for a better society. If he had stopped, he would have felt he was betraying himself. Lorenzo made his life a manifestation of hope. He certainly went through some dark times, in which it seemed to him that the only possible future might be the collapse of the system. But, as his story has shown, he didn't resign himself to what seemed inevitable. He didn't accept inequality, exploitation, poverty, or senseless violence, and he channeled his energy into more productive feelings than anger, depression, and victimhood. The struggle doesn't ensure success, but within the struggle there is hope. A different future is possible. Many people short-sightedly think that it is the matter of reforming capitalism, that the ideology has been able to make us believe there is no alternative capable of replacing it. It is precisely this perceived lack of possibility that leads many to adapt themselves to capitalism, branding those who refuse as immature adolescents who are sick with idealism and have no awareness of reality. And so they close their eyes to the problems. Many are content and close their hearts and eyes and pretend that crumbs are enough. Lorenzo's struggle against discrimination and inequalities were not everyone's struggle, particularly not the struggle of those who prosper within this system. Lorenzo didn't want to simply change his place within the framework of this society. The political aspect of his story was that Lorenzo didn't relegate dissatisfaction and hope to his personal life, but read them both as politically meaningful. Surely we mustn't stop hoping and fighting, moving collectively for a different future. Lorenzo didn't want to close his eyes as he looked for an alternative, linking his desire for a different world to his anarchist beliefs. Although it has been the dominant idea of many of the revolutionary processes of our time, the idea that we can only improve the world through the control of state power didn't add up for Lorenzo. This is probably due to the assumption that many revolutionaries have failed, either those that pass through reformism or those that try to change the power at the top. This is because in every state, in every case, they limit individual freedom. That very freedom, which Lorenzo considered fundamental, that he wasn't willing to trade for his welfare. History has shown the limits of a kind of political activity that seeks to change institutions through participation in these institutions. Unfortunately, this belief, together with the heaviness of an often frustrating and dissatisfying daily grind, has led many to the feeling of cynical disillusionment, forcing them to take refuge in the private sphere in the hope of saving some of their remaining dignity. Instead, the only way to change the society is not through the conquest of power, but its dissolution, through rediscovering spaces of anti-power, alternatives to power, linked to our participation no longer dependent on political parties, but neither on grassroots organizing collectives and autonomous community projects. Rather, on grassroots organizing collectives and autonomous community projects. Lorenzo certainly passed through these reflections because, although not yet militant, during his earlier life in Florence, he already defined himself as an anarchist, and therefore was opposed to the logic behind the conquest of state power. His message, besides being a cry of anger and protest, was a manifestation of hope, for a chance to change reality through human endeavor. Surely, Lorenzo in many moments showed us his fear of dying in this social context, a death he understood as being extinguished, of losing the strong emotional and vital richness that he possessed. But thanks to his involvement, he not only felt active, but he also went beyond this capitalist world and satisfied the human need to feel like a participant. This work did not mean for him to abandon a space for reflection, but to orient his life with the intention of thinking in the here and now, fighting for a different life in a different community. In his search for an alternative, Lorenzo joined the Kurdish Revolution, a democracy without the state, where the change comes from the bottom, through a shared economy, and where relations between people are regulated according to the principle of social ecology. Among the Kurdish people, Lorenzo found a rational system in which the individual and the community are intertwined. Lorenzo could thereby realize the values and the ideals in which he believed and find the answers he was looking for, making his life a success. His comrades told us that once during an exercise, Lorenzo, together with other internationals, was sent for a reconnaissance with the purpose of making a precise map of the territory without being caught. Lorenzo immediately separated from his companions, returning alone with a detailed map, but getting a scolding. For the Kurds, you leave together and come back together. You don't go alone but in a group, valuing the individual within it. At first, Lorenzo's experience in northeast Syria were supposed to end after 6 months, but during that time, Lorenzo strongly bonded with the people of those places and their stories. For this reason, he stayed there from September 22nd, 2017 until March 18th, 2019, also participating in the frontline military missions. After he left for Syria, we asked him on many occasions whether he intended to return, and he repeatedly told us that the war against ISIS and the building of democratic confederalism were not over yet. The following pages are a collection of the thoughts and experiences Lorenzo wanted to share with his family, friends, and everyone who fights alongside the oppressed. We consider these words worthy of being spread, and we hope they inspire future generations to make meaningful choices such as his. By Alessandro, Annalisa, and Chiara Orsetti. So this is the end of the introduction of Orso, Wartime Journals of an Anarchist. And I'm going to end this now, and I might continue with a few short chapters, and then I'll switch over to the communist newspaper I have here that I like to share. But again, I was in Rojava at the same time as this comrade who was killed fighting against ISIS. I fought against ISIS in the same location in the same battles as Orso, and we shared many of the same difficulties in Rojava in northeast Syria. So this book has a special meaning for me. I'm a communist. Orso was an anarchist, but he joined the communist militants there and fought against ISIS. And all of this is very inspiring, and I hope that it inspires you too. Answer Captain.